Hi there, Rebels and Powit fans. This is SeanOrange from Powit TV, and we are back with another episode of Famicom Dojo. This is the first and our last set of episodes for Season 1, and this one is all about hardware. While not specific to Nintendo, we are going to talk about Nintendo's first use of cartridges with the Famicom and NES, as well as some modifications and expansions. But first, I'm kind of sick of sitting down, so I think I'm going to stand up. Weird. In the halcyon days of the Atari, that the NES through the Genesis and Super Nintendo before CDs were used, cartridges were the de facto standard for video game consoles, with few exceptions. As we mentioned during the battery backup episode, ROM stands for read-only memory. Chips and circuit boards were expensive to produce, but the direct connection to the system hardware was fast, even though the Famicom and NES hardware was light years behind today's cell phones. Man, why do these things keep locking up? Before the advent of the general-purpose console, earlier systems built games directly into the hardware, a practice that continues today with some knockoff TV games built into devices like an N64-style controller. Examples include the Famicom's predecessors, the Color TV series of game systems. Wait, what? Nintendo made systems before the Famicom? That's something we'll have to come back to later.
Oh, Bozo!
Games can't be added or removed from these systems. The games are included on the system hardware as ROM chips. Cartridges are just removable sets of these ROM chips. That's why nothing happens when you turn a cartridge system on. Not only is the game a physical extension of the hardware, it also completes a physical circuit and can contain the entire operating system. That's also why certain physical additions to the hardware were possible, such as the Super Famicom and Super Nintendo FX chip. But also why it needs to be included with every cart, and cartridges are expensive enough to produce as it is. The battery backup was one such common enhancement for both NES and Famicom. Another hardware enhancement was common for the Famicom, but not the NES, which we'll talk about shortly. Ready to get your mind blown? Some early NES games used this adapter to make the Famicom circuit boards work in an NES. This was a cost-saving device to use existing boards rather than tool completely new boards for an unchanged game. Was it laziness? Was there no tooling available to make NES cartridges in those early days? It's a little unclear. The top part is the Famicom board. It's backwards for some reason. The bottom part is the NES adapter, including this chip, which we'll talk about in a moment. The middle is the bridge connector for the pins. The top part is a complete copy of the Famicom Gyromite.
Wait just a second here.
Or Robot Gyro, as the title screen says. Attached back onto the adapter, this cartridge works perfectly with an NES.
Don't even think about it!
It's only an adapter. It doesn't change the game in any way or add any features, even though it says Gyromite in the case. Inside is the same as its Japanese counterpart. Why use this adapter at all? Why not just plug cartridges into the NES? Because, as we mentioned during our second episode, the NES pin configuration had changed from the Famicom's. A Famicom has 60 pins, 30 on each side. The NES has 72 pins, 36 on each side. Where do these extra pins come from? 4 pins were added for the 10 NES lockout chip. The cart would send an authentication code to its counterpart in the NES. Without this, the system could not boot up. Poor communication with this chip caused by dirty, bent, or corroded pins was the primary reason for the infamous flashing red light.
Hey man, you gonna fix this?
The Famicom, which had been out for 2 years longer, didn't have a comparable chip, and unlicensed games were becoming more common. Nintendo didn't want this to happen for the NES. Even with this safeguard, many companies that manufactured these unlicensed carts would use a voltage spike to knock the 10 NES chip offline. Others found ways to bypass this lockout chip by piggybacking a legitimate cartridge to use its lockout chip, or reverse engineering the chip completely. The cartridge adapter carried its own copy of this chip to allow the Famicom boards to work. 10 more pins were added for direct connection to the expansion port at the bottom of the NES. The expansion port could be used for add-ons such as the disk system. This theoretically didn't require the RAM cartridge and cable that the Famicom used, and also meant that a cartridge could be used at the same time as the disk system or other add-on. This also meant that cards could use features of an add-on such as the disk system's FN synthesis chip. The Famicom design required that any cartridge that used the FN synthesis chip have it embedded on each card. The NES design, by comparison, allowed for one chip to exist in the add-on and let any software use it, whether it be disk or cartridge.
Ha ha ha! Take that! Oh, hokohe.
But wait, 60 plus 10 plus 4... Isn't that 74? Yeah, and it's kind of a doozy. 2 pins were actually removed from the Famicom spec, the 2 that controlled sound expansion, such as the FM synthesis chip. Because of this change, arguably a cost-saving measure, the NES is unable to support FM synthesis on the cart. Any sound expansion would have to come from an add-on, which never came, so the feature was useless. However, several Famicom carts supported this feature. Regions are actually something that are added on to games and other entertainment media. Before the advent of the DVD, regions really had more to do with hardware issues, such as the differences between the NTSC and PAL video output formats. Modern regions, by comparison, are more driven by commercial concerns. While the 10 NES chip is essentially a region lockout, its original intention was to prevent the operation of unlicensed games, rather than those from across the Pacific. In fact, apart from those video output differences, most non-disc consoles are region-free. The Super Nintendo, the N64, the entire Game Boy series, and the DS. Even the Game Boy player for the region-locked GameCube is cross-compatible. But that's another segment entirely. You may remember last episode we introduced our first ever Dojo mailbag. Well, as it turns out, the name Dojo Mailbag is already taken. So send us an email, or if you're watching this on YouTube, make a video response and tell us what you think we should call the segment, or if we should even have one at all. Well, that's all we have for this episode. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, check out the show notes at Power TV, leave us some feedback. We'll be back next time with some more Famicom Dojo goodness. Enjoy!
Famicom Dojo 次回
Well, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty great. I think the episode went really well. I like the new set, so I think we should just keep going. Let's do the next episode right now. What's my next line? Oh, everyone, say hi to SeanOrange from episode 1. Hey, due to budget restraints, we have to use past versions of ourselves for the film and lighting crew. Say hi, Sean. How's it going? So your next line is... Oh, man, what are you trying to do there? Trying to get some kind of temporal paradox warp thingy? Something?